Rob,
It's good to have you here.
thank you, and it's so good to be here. And you know, Rob, as we've been talking the last few days, I really want to take advantage of your immense amount of knowledge around HOP and all of the intentional leadership aspects around the essential leadership cycle. You know, organizations, every time I would say that we put the essential leadership cycle in front of people, and one of the first questions we asked, which, you know, I learned from you was, where do you have your biggest struggles? Typically, they go to trust and accountability. And as you well know, accountability is well around that cycle. It's one of the resultant conditions, if you like. So what I'd like to do, you know, I think most organizations could benefit from hearing your perspective of how accountability actually plays out, even in the realm of how does it get impacted by the HOP principles and all that you already know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, it's important to realize that accountability and discipline are different things, and they tend to get conflated together. But if you think about the fact that accountability needs to be developed, not demanded, then you can say, well, okay, how would we develop accountability? Let's not get confused on wanting to blame someone. So, you know, error is normal, the first principle. You think about that and you say, well, if error is normal, we're not trying to normalize error. We're not trying to make it normal. We're trying to say that people are fallible and we all make mistakes. And if blame fixes nothing, then immediately jumping to accountability fixes nothing, because accountability and blame, again, are conflated in most organizations. So you have to understand that self and team awareness, what do we know and not know? Shared vision and values, do we really respect our people, our processes, our systems in our organization? Clarity of roles and processes, do we have roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and authorities? And again, a lot of people jumble those together. But when we want to hold someone accountable, are we really saying, you know what your role is, here's your role, here's what it looks like, here's what it feels like. Here's what you're responsible for and who you're responsible to. Here's what you're accountable for and who you're accountable to. And here's what you have the authority to do and not do. And very often organizations don't play that out. They just want to hold someone accountable after they've given them some kind of rule, whether that rule is any good or not. So if you have good clarity of roles and processes, you start to develop trust because you're not trying to blame people and hold people accountable. What we're doing is turning our reactions into a response. And we use that using pause and play. But when you turn your reaction into a response, the need for blame and accountability is pushed down the line until you have enough information to understand, was it an error? Was it a violation? Was that deviation an active error or latent error? Do I know the difference between those? Do I know the science and probability of those? Was the individual in knowledge-based performance mode, in which case, who are you going to hold accountable the old accountability way in knowledge-based performance mode? But organizations aren't putting all this together. They're not using a holistic HOP. You know, some of them jump straight to learning. You know, if learning is essential, well, that's great, but you got to know a lot to learn. So we get information. We take that information. We get a lot of data. We turn that data into information. We turn that information into knowledge, and we turn that knowledge into action. And accountability is way down that line. You can't just go from data, Lewis messed up, to accountability. Now I'm going to hold him accountable for messing up. So by putting accountability near the end of the essential leadership cycle, we develop it through using the driving elements, self-team awareness, shared vision and values, clear roles and processes. That starts to generate trust so we can get diverse and inclusive input. We can start to commit, and our people are never going to commit to a level greater than we're willing to. And then we can start to talk about accountability. And that's how you develop accountability instead of demanding it. And a lot of organizations think that accountability is an iron fist thing, but it's really not. That's discipline. That's blame. So the whole using the HOP principles holistically and using them to improve the way you do your business, using them as the next logical step, means you're not throwing the accountability word out at every minute. You're actually following the process. And look, you and I both know if you can get leaders to follow models, processes, and tools, you can get workers to follow models, processes, and tools. And the opposite is also true. So what are some of the questions that come up about accountability that they frame as accountability, but probably really something else?
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, well, the conversation starts with the organization saying, our accountability model isn't working. But then, just like you say, a lot of the time, that accountability model is more of a culpability model.
Right.
But so if somebody says, some organization comes to you open-minded and says, can you offer us a model by which we can actually understand accountability in a more proactive way, what would you say?
Well, I think first you need to understand the practical application of the human and organizational performance principles. In other words, what's behind that? If I'm going to say self and team awareness, what am I and my team aware of related to error is normal? Do I have clear science-based definitions for error, violation, deviation, active error, and latent error? And are we using those? Once we start using those, are we paying attention to the probabilities? And those probabilities are fixed. They can be probability for error within the performance modes or mental models. They can be probability for error within the how bad things happen model. So understanding those elements creates the self and team awareness that all we really have to do is say, does it meet our values to treat people well? Does it meet our values to be just in the way we approach things? Does it meet our values to understand a problem before we act on the problem? And then once you get to that point and you start using models like deviation potential and deviation analysis. So a lot of people think deviation analysis is the accountability model. So I'll just give you a quick Robism here. If you use an accountability model, you're messed up from the very beginning, because the very model tells people what you're trying to do. So if you go to somebody and say, we're going to run our accountability model, what do they think you're trying to do? I mean, you can't have blame fixes nothing and an accountability model. And the culpability model is even worse. So we teach how to analyze deviations from the rules, processes, and standards by understanding both the probabilities and how it happens. So deviation analysis is a massive tool for leaders to use. Interesting thing about it is, I don't care who you are, you're going to wind up in the right place if you follow that model. Accountability models aren't that way. You can manipulate your way through an accountability model, and you will not be anywhere close to the probabilities that we know exist. We've known for 50 or 60 years, and you don't pay any attention to the fact that you're outside the probabilities. Where else in your organization can you get away with ignoring probabilities? And this is the only place that I know of people routinely do it. So understanding deviation analysis, understanding how our processes drive error, understanding how our processes or our systems drive people to be outside of our processes and systems. All of that is part and parcel of understanding how accountability works as an organization. I'm accountable to you, you're accountable to me, we're accountable to the organization and systems are accountable to us. So accountability is built in, it's developed, not just I'm trying to hold you accountable. The minute an organization says they want to hold somebody accountable, they're using accountability as a substitute for discipline.
Excellent, Rob. Thank you. And as we're here developing our upcoming Aero Intentional Leadership Academy, we will have a large piece of it will be dedicated to exactly what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, exactly right. Because it requires some intentionality. So when we started forming the Intentional Leadership Academy, we started saying, well, what are some of the important things that organizations are missing out there? that if they hit on, the leaders who are intentional about it can actually change the way the organization performs, create sustainable improvements, use it as a next logical step instead of throw the baby out with the bathwater and try something new.
Excellent. Rob, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lewis. Appreciate it. Always good.